Which wild pig would win in a showdown? The shaggy beast from European forests, or the tough survivor of the African savanna? Hey there, fellow animal lovers. I've got a wild one for you today, literally. We're diving into a head-to-head comparison of two of nature's most underestimated bruisers, the European wild boar and the African warthog. And trust me, this isn't just a piggy tale from the barnyard. Now, before you picture a cute cartoon piglet, let me stop you right there. Wild boars are built like tanks with tusks. I once saw one plow through a bush like it owed him money. Meanwhile, warthogs may look a little goofy with those big warty cheeks, but don't be fooled, they're fast, sharp-tusked, and know how to pick a fight and survive it. So here's the question, if these two ever cross paths, who's walking away and who's running for cover? Is size the deciding factor, or does street smarts and speed win the day? Stick around as we dig into size, strength, smarts, and survival skills to settle one of the wildest pig matchups on the planet. Let the battle of the tusks begin. Alright folks, get ready, because today we're stepping out of the jungle and into the mud with two of the wildest, weirdest, and most wonderfully underrated animals in the world. You might think pigs are just barnyard fluffballs that oink and roll in the dirt, but think again. What if I told you some pigs come armed with tusks like swords, hairy coats like linebackers, and enough survival skills to make a wilderness scout jealous? Let's meet our contenders. In one corner, we have the wild boar. This beast hails from the deep forests of Europe and Asia and holds the proud title of ancestor to every farm pig you've ever seen. You know that pulled pork sandwich you had last weekend? That pig's great-great-great-grandpappy was probably one of these guys. Wild boars are built tough. They've got powerful, compact bodies, a rugged bristle-covered coat, and razor-sharp tusks that can slice through underbrush or trouble. Now picture this. You're hiking through a forest in Germany and suddenly hear rustling. It's not a deer, it's a wild boar eyeing you from the shadows. Trust me, I've been there. Your first instinct is to back up slowly and respectfully, because these animals aren't just strong. They're confident, clever, and totally fearless. But wait, we've got a challenger. Enter the warthog, the scrappy underdog of the African savanna. Don't let the funny name or cartoon reputation fool you. Yes, they've got those wart-like growths on their faces that make them look like they've had a rough day at the office, but those are natural armor plates. Think of them like built-in cheek shields. And those tusks, long, curved, and dangerous. These guys may not be as bulky as wild boars, but what they lack in size, they make up for in agility, smarts, and grit. Warthogs are survivors. They live in harsh, hot environments, often sleeping in burrows they borrow from aardvarks. And when trouble comes knocking, they don't just run they back into the burrow so their tusks face the danger. Now that's strategy, so here's the million-dollar question. If you had to face off with one of these in the wild, which would you pick? The muscular, battle-hardened wild boar or the cunning, tusk-swinging warthog? Which one is the true master of the mud? Stay tuned, because we're just getting started. Now let's talk size, because in the animal kingdom, it's not just about brains or bravery, it's also about brawn. And when it comes to these two tough customers, the tape measure tells a fascinating story. Let's start with the wild boar. This bad boy is no lightweight. A fully grown male can tip the scales at a whopping 200 to 300 kilograms. That's over 600 pounds of grunting, charging, tusk-swinging muscle. Imagine a Harley-Davidson with tusks and an attitude stomping through the forest, and you've got the idea. These guys can grow up to 1.8 meters long, and when they stand, their shoulders can reach nearly 3 feet high. That's not a piggy, that's a bulldozer in a fur coat. I've seen one up close in the Carpathian Mountains, and let me tell you, when it locked eyes with me, I suddenly remembered every survival show I've ever watched. You don't mess with that kind of power, but don't count out the warthog just yet. While smaller in size, this scrappy contender still brings some serious hardware to the party. Warthogs usually weigh between 50 and 150 kilograms, or about 100 to 330 pounds. Sure, that's less than the wild boar, but still plenty to knock you off your feet. They can grow up to 1.5 meters long and stand about 85 centimeters high at the shoulder. And here's where things get really interesting, those upper tusks. They can grow up to 64 centimeters long. That's more than 2 feet of curved ivory ready to slice, stab, or scare off anything that gets too close. If tusks were swords, the warthogs would be long and flashy, like a pirate's cutlass, while the wild boars would be thick and brutal, more like a short Roman gladius. Both are deadly in the right hooves, so what do you think matters more in a wild showdown, sheer body mass or weapon length? Would you put your money on the big bruiser or the lean fighter with the long blades? Stay with me, because we're about to look at where these two live and how their environment has shaped the way they survive. Alright, now that we've sized up these wild warriors, let's take a little journey across the globe to see where they call home. Because just like people, animals are shaped by where they live. And trust me, the neighborhoods of these two are worlds apart literally. Let's start with the wild boar. These tough customers roam the dense woodlands of Europe and Asia, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. But thanks to human activity and maybe a few ups moments from colonial times, they've also made their way into North America. Yep, wild boars are now hanging out in parts of the United States, especially down south in places like Texas, where they've become kind of a problem. And by kind of a problem, I mean they tear up farmland like a four-legged tornado with tusks. Now wild boars aren't too picky, but they do have their preferences. They love areas with thick vegetation and nearby water, the kind of spots where they can root around for food, hide from predators, and take a nice mud bath in peace. If you've ever wandered into a quiet forest and stumbled onto a churned-up patch of earth, there's a good chance you just found where a wild boar had dinner. Now shift your mental GPS and head south to the savannas of Africa, because that's where the warthog makes its living. And what a wild life it is. Hot sun, open plains, prowling predators. This is not your average backyard. To survive out here, warthogs have developed some clever tricks. One of my favorites. They take over burrows dug by aardvarks. That's right. These guys don't dig their own homes. They're squatters, but smart ones. Those abandoned burrows give them shelter from the blazing heat during the day and provide a safe escape hatch when lions, hyenas, or leopards come sniffing around. And get this, warthogs actually back into the burrows so that their tusks are pointing out, ready to fight off anything foolish enough to follow them in. Talk about turning defense into offense. So now the big question. Does living in a lush forest give the wild boar the upper hand with stealth and cover? Or does surviving in the open, dangerous savanna turn the warthog into a tougher, more adaptable fighter? Stick around, because next we're digging into what fuels these two literally. You won't believe what they're willing to eat. Now let's talk food, because what an animal eats tells you a whole lot about how it survives, how it fights, and sometimes ... how gross it's willing to get. Both the wild boar and the warthog are what we call opportunistic omnivores. That's a fancy way of saying they'll eat just about anything that doesn't run away fast enough. Fruits, delicious. Rich, sure. Insects, bird eggs, small animals. You bet. Rotten meat, yep. Even poop, unfortunately, yes. I know it's not exactly five-star dining, but when you're living wild, picky eaters don't last long. Let's start with the wild boar, the forest forager supreme. These guys have a built-in rototiller for a nose. I once watched one turn over an entire patch of ground in just minutes, snuffling out roots and truffles like a gourmet on a mission. But don't let that truffle-sniffing talent fool you, wild boars. We'll also go full horror movie if the opportunity presents itself. Carrion, baby birds, small reptiles. If it fits in the mouth, it's dinner. They're nature's cleanup crew, and they do the job with gusto. Now the warthog, this one's got some serious survival hustle. Out on the African plains, food can be scarce and seasons can be brutal. So warthogs have adapted with not only a nose for sniffing out buried roots and tubers, but also hooves made for digging. Yep, they don't just wait for food to fall from the sky, they literally root through the dirt like little bulldozers. Watching a warthog dig is like watching a toddler go after a cookie jar. Persistent, messy, and oddly impressive. And here's the fun twist. While both animals are scavengers when they need to be, warthogs actually kneel down on their front legs to eat. I'm not joking. Their wrists are calloused from kneeling so often. Imagine a grumpy, tusked yoga instructor doing a weird downward dog pose every time he grabs a snack. So the question is, does a better diet make for a better fighter? Or is it the one who's willing to eat just about anything that ends up tougher in the wild? Stick with me, because next we're diving into behavior and personality, and trust me, This is where it gets spicy. Alright, now we've covered where they live and what they eat, but what about how they live? Because when the sun rises or sets, these two wild cousins go about their day or night in very different ways. And some of their habits are downright hilarious. Let's start with the wild boar. These guys are the ultimate night owls of the forest. While you're tucking into bed with a cozy blanket and a late-night snack, the wild boar is just clocking in for work. They're nocturnal, which means they do most of their foraging, exploring, and general troublemaking under the cover of darkness. Whether it's a moonlit root buffet or a midnight mud bath, these pigs love to party after dark, and they don't go it alone. Wild boars live in groups called sounders. I know, it sounds like a marching band, and honestly, it kind of fits. A sounder is usually made up of females and their young, all snuffling and grunting their way through the underbrush like a little piggy parade. And let me tell you, when a sounder moves through the forest, they don't exactly tiptoe. It's more like a freight train made of mud and muscle. Now the warthog, on the other hand, is a full-blown morning person. These guys are diurnal, which means they're active during the day, basking under the African sun and getting their business done before bedtime. I've always said warthogs have the soul of a hard-working farmer. Up early, dig for food, roll in the mud, take care of the family, and call it a day before the predators come out for dinner. Speaking of family, warthogs tend to stick to small family groups, usually made up of a mama and her piglets. They're social, loyal, and surprisingly affectionate until someone messes with their kids. Then all baits are off, and yes, they love mud baths. It's not just for fun though, it looks like it. Mud helps them cool off under that blazing African sun and protects their skin from insects. Honestly, the warthog has mastered spa day better than most people I know. Picture a warthog flopping down in a muddy puddle, eyes half closed in bliss, and tell me that isn't one of the happiest looking animals on the planet. So now I have to ask, does being active at night give the wild boar an edge in stealth and surprise? Or does the warthog's sun-loving lifestyle and tight family bond make it a smarter, stronger survivor in the long run? Get ready, because next we're going to talk about what happens when these two actually face off and who's got the better shot at walking away. Alright folks, we've talked about the lifestyle, the diet, the habits, even the love of a good mud bath, but now it's time for the big question. The one that keeps wildlife nerds like me awake at night. If you dropped a wild boar and a warthog into the same arena hypothetically, of course who's walking out the winner? Let's talk size first, because in the animal kingdom, size definitely matters. The wild boar is the heavyweight of the pig world. Some of these brutes can tip the scales at over 600 pounds, which is almost twice the size of a big warthog. Imagine a linebacker charging straight at you with tusks. That's basically a wild boar on a mission. Now the warthog, while smaller, usually around 100 to 330 pounds at most, is no pushover. These animals are built like tanks on stilts, and their tusks can grow up to 25 inches long. I've seen one stare down a lion, then turn tail and dash into a burrow like a pro escape artist. They're fast, alert, and know exactly when to stand their ground and when to run for the hills. But if we're talking about a one-on-one, no escape route, all-out brawl, the odds lean heavily in favor of the wild boar. Its sheer size, brute strength, and aggressive nature make it one of the most dangerous wild animals in its range. Wild boars don't back down easily, and when cornered, they become absolute wrecking balls of fury. The warthog, despite its intimidating tusks and battle-scarred face, relies more on evasion and speed than on brute force. It's like comparing a street fighter to a tactical ninja. Both can do damage, but one is swinging with more weight and less mercy. So who wins the clash of the tusks? In most scenarios, the wild boar would probably take the crown. But let's not forget, nature doesn't always follow the rulebook. One wrong move, one lucky strike from the warthog, and suddenly it's an upset for the ages. And here's what I love about these kinds of matchups: it's not just about strength or teeth or weight. It's about instinct, experience, and sometimes sheer luck. That's what makes the wild world so thrilling. So now I have to ask, if you had to bet on one of these rough and tumble tusk titans, where would you place your money? Let me know, and stick around for more wild face-offs you never knew you needed. Up next, we might just look at a showdown between a honey badger and, well, anything, because that little beast fears absolutely nothing. So, who's your champion in this tusk to tusk showdown? The heavyweight forest bruiser or the clever savanna scrapper? Hit that like button if you learned something new, drop a comment with your pick, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild face-offs. The animal kingdom is full of surprises, and we're just getting started. Honestly, I didn't expect to root for the warthog, but that mud-loving underdog has some serious charm. Still, the wild boar is like a tank with teeth. Nature doesn't mess around.